Good afternoon, and welcome to the 14th Annual Theodore M. Hesburgh Award and Frank Cahill Lecture, both jointly sponsored by the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business and the Institute for Ethical Business Worldwide. I'm Professor Pat Murphy, and I'll be the MC for this event. My role is to introduce several people and keep the proceedings on schedule, and this year I'll have to substitute a couple other roles, but I'll also make those go quickly. Our order of events for this afternoon is that we'll begin with a few introductions, then talk a bit about the Cahill Lecture, background on Frank Cahill, whom we honor, and the Cahill Lecture itself will be given by the 4 MBA students you see in front of you. Then we'll move to the Hesburgh Award presented to Southwest Airlines. First, I'd like to welcome Frank Cahill's son, Mike Cahill, a Notre Dame alumnus and CEO of Tower Financial Corporation in Fort Wayne, his wife Mary and son Colin sitting right up here, and their niece Kathleen Sweeney. I'm sorry your mother Marty can't make it, Mike, but please tell her she's missed, and we'll hope she makes it next year. Second, I'd like to recognize Roger Wong, the Dean of the Mendoza College of Business. Great to have you with us, Roger. Thanks. And third, I'd like to welcome back Christine Ortega from Southwest Airlines, who happens to be a Notre Dame alum, who's here to accept the Hesburgh Award on behalf of the company, and you'll hear more about her later. Now I'd like to provide some background on the Cahill Lecture. The Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture was established after Frank's untimely death from cancer at the age of 59. Frank grew up in Syracuse, New York, and he always dreamed of attending Notre Dame. His graduation at the beginning of it started an abiding connection between the Cahill family and the university. This connection now includes his son Mike that you just met and his oldest grandson Sean, and maybe others that I don't know about as well. After earning a BS in commerce, Frank enjoyed a very successful career as an executive in the trucking industry, and he retired as an officer for Roadway Express. Integrity, character, and ethics were cornerstones of Frank's life and career throughout his nearly 40 years in business. He experienced firsthand the challenge that a commitment to ethical business practice can occur in the pursuit of both personal and professional success. Frank recognized the real need to introduce young professionals to some sort of ethical considerations as they face the business world. And doing this today, we'll have our panelists share some ethical dilemmas that they faced. The Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture focuses on core principles of integrity and ethical behavior in the business environment and provides the Notre Dame community with a lasting reminder of Frank's exemplary qualities. So to provide the Cahill Lecture, we have 4 MBA students joining us, and they'll give advice on some ethical issues that they've faced early in their career. Since the panelists are maybe going to be talking rather frankly about their former employers, the specific companies with which they work will not be mentioned in my introduction, with one exception. Starting first with Nicole O'Connor. Let's see, who's Nicole there? On the far side is a second-year MBA student. She received her undergraduate degree from Notre Dame in management consulting. Nicole worked for 3 years in the healthcare and investment management fields before returning back to school. Chris, friends, I had it right before, but now I'm stumbling on. Francica is our second MBA student panelist, also graduated from Notre Dame as a marketing major. He worked in the telecommunications industry for Nokia before coming back for his MBA. Since he's going to talk frankly about Nokia in his presentation, he's not concerned about us naming names at this point. Stephen Danford is a second-year MBA student concentrating in finance. He earned his undergraduate degree from John Carroll University. Steve worked in the investment industry before enrolling in Notre Dame for his MBA and plans to return to that field once he graduates. George Hayes is also concentrating in finance during his MBA. He's a graduate of St. Michael's College in Vermont with a degree in accounting. George is a CPA and worked in public accounting prior to the MBA program. So now we'll have our presentations by our panelists. Nicole?
Thank you so much. Oh, can you hear me okay, everyone? So thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege to present to you, especially being a Notre Dame student, to be on this side of the stage now. But a few years ago, I was in my own undergraduate business ethics class, and I'm sitting there thinking, how will this ever apply to me? I'm sure when the situations arise, I'll be able to make the right decision. It'll be very clear, very black and white. And especially at that point, I had had the support of my parents and thinking, okay, I already have a great ethics system instilled in me. Shouldn't you know the right thing to do by this age? But fast forward a few years, and I felt really lucky that I had that introductory ethics class because it helped guide me in thinking what was the right thing to do in those situations and help me preserve my integrity. And for a few years, I had the opportunity to work in a respected hospital's development department. And sorry, is this a little better? Can you hear? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so for one of my work experiences, I had the chance to work in the development office for a hospital, and I was really excited because it seemed like the perfect fit for me, and working at a nonprofit had been one of my goals. Maybe it was the Notre Dame service streak when I was here, but I was really excited and looking forward to the position. But even in the interview process, something felt a little bit off with the culture, but I kind of brushed it aside because I had wanted to work at the hospital. But it probably should have been a warning to me if I felt that uncomfortable just from my interview. And things were okay for the first few months, but it was kind of clear quickly that the people in the office weren't the most supportive, and it was a difficult environment because people would talk about each other behind their backs or gossip, even if it was just to pass the time. And so I could feel myself being slowly sucked into that and just changing as a person and kind of losing my integrity for a little bit. And so each day when I had to go home, I just tried to check myself and make sure that I was being true to myself, and even if it meant not fitting in with my coworkers, which was tough at the time because I wanted to build my reputation and get along with everyone. But to help fix this, I had sought out a mentor to help me navigate the environment, and she was really helpful in trying to do the right thing. But one of the ethical issues I faced was I was assigned to work with one of our senior managing directors, and one of the roles was to process expense reports. And the person training me had shown me the right way to do things, but he had also said for certain expenses you should enter them this way so we could kind of get around certain hospital restrictions. And I felt really uncomfortable with that, especially even though they were small expenses, but it was just almost one of those moments we had talked about in my ethics class, thinking, okay, this is almost a small gateway to future things. If I'm willing to compromise right now, what will they give me in the future? If they'd be like, okay, Nicole's fine with that. So I had to stop, and I talked to my mentor about it, but she had said, don't worry about it. It's just what everyone does. It's no big deal. But there's still this little voice in the back of my head thinking, no, this is wrong. I shouldn't do this. And so I talked to my parents about it, and I told the person who was training me I just didn't feel comfortable entering those expenses. So I didn't, and that got me around the situation, even though it still wasn't right that we were processing expenses in a certain way. But at least for that moment, I felt that I could still interact with my coworkers and work to build my reputation. But it's just reminded me that I'm always going to be in those difficult situations where I'm in a new environment or I'm trying to get along with my coworkers and build their trust and respect, but there might be conflicts of what feels right or what I need to do to preserve my integrity. So you need to have a good system in place. You need to have mentors or your parents or someone you trust to really help you along the way. And I know I've even reached back out to Notre Dame professors when I've had challenging work situations, and I'd really just recommend that you do that because you will have those inevitable gray areas, but you'll be able to get through them and be stronger and have that great reputation still intact if you have that support system. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks to Professor Murphy for having us here to talk. Also, congratulations to Southwest Airlines on the Hesburgh Award. That's fantastic. I want to talk to you, as Professor Murphy said, a little bit about my experience at Nokia, who was my only employer after I graduated from school here in 2008. So most of you hopefully are familiar with the company. I'll give you a little bit of background on the one specific ethical issue I want to talk about. So most of you probably know them as that cell phone manufacturer from the 90s. They're actually probably the largest handset manufacturer from the late 90s until about 2012 when they got passed by Samsung. But in 2007, of course, everybody knows is when the iPhone first launched and smartphones started becoming a huge device in the market. And that was about the point when Nokia started falling behind. Just to give you a couple of statistics, in 2007, before the iPhone launched, Nokia had over 50% market share in the smartphone industry. Last year, they came in just a shade under 4%, so they lost an awful lot. They lost about 60% of their market cap in the 3 years after the iPhone launched in 2007. So they were hurting financially, their reputation took a hit. They actually exited the market in the US because they weren't getting any traction. So when I first started working there, they were trying to regain some of this momentum. And in the story I want to talk about takes place in 2012. They were re-entering the US market with a new phone called the Lumia 920. And Nokia had always had a reputation for two really important features. One is durability, and the other is really cool camera technology. So they developed this new technology called optical image stabilization, or OIS. Basically, they surround the sensor in the camera with tiny springs that suspends the motion and makes it really easy to take good pictures and good quality video if you're moving on a bumpy road, or if you're walking, or if it's in really low light conditions. The sensor can stay open for longer, so you can take better quality pictures. And if you saw demonstrations of the technology, it looked really cool. It was actually pretty groundbreaking. So Nokia thought they had something really special here, and they wanted to capitalize on that to sort of get back into the smartphone market. So for the Lumia 920 launch, they created a video that they were hoping would go viral because they didn't make it into a commercial. It was just an online video that they released to a number of tech publications. And basically it showed a demonstration of the technology. Most of the video was purportedly shot with the new phone, which hadn't been launched yet. But it showed a couple, a man and a woman on their bicycles riding down a bumpy road. The guy was using his phone to take pictures of the woman, and then it shows screenshots and video of the phone, and of course it's beautiful and lovely. So a publication called The Verge did some freeze frame analysis on this, and it turns out when they were riding their bikes past a small glass window, you could see in the reflection not the guy holding the phone, but actually a white van with the side door open and a guy sitting there with a professional camera taking these pictures. So they got caught. And they took a lot of backlash from this in the media. But the lesson here is that they had a really quick response because they knew that they messed up. So the very same day that The Verge came out with their article saying that these things had been faked, they immediately came out with an apology. They basically said, we weren't trying to intentionally deceive anybody. This was supposed to be a video demonstration of the technology, not necessarily the specific smartphone, which wasn't clear at all in the video. But they admitted their mistake. And it was interesting because it ended up not being a huge issue for Nokia because they acted so quickly. So I think the first kind of takeaway is that in 9 out of 10 cases, if you're in a position of power and you make this kind of mistake, the best response is to immediately fall on your sword, make amends as quickly as possible. From a personal perspective, I was in marketing, but I wasn't working on the mobile phones team, so these were people that were kind of far away from me. The only thing I could really do is sort of voice my opinion within the company. So I emailed the VP of marketing who was in charge of this particular campaign, voiced my opinion, and that was really all I could do to make my thoughts known internally. But I think an important thing to note is that this also has some external consequences. So people who knew I worked for Nokia, who knew about this particular issue, their opinions of me may have been affected, especially my professional reputation may have been affected by this. So I guess the other important lesson is when you're looking for a job, make sure you also do some research into the ethical backgrounds of the company and particularly the culture of the company where you're going, because it may be the case for you where people who are not related to you or don't work with you could potentially impact your professional reputation without you having a hand in it. So yeah, I think those are the important lessons. Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Danford. 1 year MBA here. Oops, sorry. That good? Sounds good. My name's Steve Danford. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm going to give you a quick background. My background's in the finance industry, specifically come from investment banking, the big bad investment banking, as everybody thinks it is. But I went to undergrad in Cleveland and then worked after that time for a small investment bank. We had 12 full-time employees in Cleveland, so not the kind of big Wall Street banks that you would assume, or that you hear all the stories in the Wall Street Journal about, but you'll see that a lot of the same issues we encountered were the same ones that you see on Wall Street. So just a quick background, I'm going to talk about a specific transaction that we worked on and some details around it. Now, I wasn't directly involved in this transaction, but saw everything that occurred along the way. There was a group, so being in the Midwest, there are thousands of community banks in the area, and many of which were influenced or impacted by the recession in 2008. And many of which received TARP money. Now, one particular bank that was from my hometown in Akron, Ohio, received TARP funds in 2008. The bank wasn't doing well before the recession, but when the recession hit, they were selected and basically forced to take these TARP funds. And so this is fast forward to 2010. My firm was cast to help raise money for this firm. There were 3 branches, so very small community bank. Really no presence outside of Ohio. And so we were tasked to, basically at this point, the bank had 6 months of runway left or they were going to go bankrupt, both because of the overhang that TARP had on the company, and both the company wasn't doing well to begin with. So we were tasked to raise $20 million for this company. That's what it needed to kind of recapitalize itself and continue on a hopefully successful path. And so this was a messy deal to begin with. As I said earlier, the bank wasn't making money even before the recession. The bank was on its 3rd management team, so clearly the revolving door in management isn't a good sign. Nobody could figure out basically how to fix this thing. And so we came in with an investor group that came with $15 million. So there's 3/4 of what they were looking to raise. But we had taken, that was 6 months prior. So it had been 6 months since we were able to identify any more money and kind of hit a wall. Couldn't find anybody who was willing to invest. Well, this senior banker that was working on the deal just kept hard-nosed, kept pushing through it and knocking on doors, making phone calls, trying to track down this last $5 million. And fast forward, but we were actually able to close the deal, but without some hiccups along the way that didn't come out until after the deal closed. As it kind of came out later, the guy had knocked on so many doors and pushed so many buttons that this is just one of several different examples. He had sold $20,000 worth of stock to an 80-year-old lady who had never owned a stock before in her life, couldn't possibly evaluate the risks that would go along with owning a common stock in a bank in her backyard. Now, she was a customer. We called her and talked to her afterwards. She'd been a customer of the bank for 20 plus years, and her comment was, I knew I was investing in the company, but I really just wanted to support the bank. I didn't want to see my bank go out of business. And this is, if anybody's from the securities industry knows that this is like 101 of they call it suitability analysis, or that's your job as the advisor, as the banker, to determine who should and shouldn't be able to buy a security. And so that was just one kind of awful example of what this guy did to close the deal and hopefully and help his bonus. Well, these kind of facts and figures kept rolling out after the deal closed. And our compliance department figured out or determined that this was so bad that we needed to fire the guy because it was going to have such ramifications for our firm. So we did. And as it came back, he sued the firm. So the senior banker that was fired sued our firm and ensued. I had, in this middle of this time, had left for business school and was hoping to return to the firm afterwards. But the senior banker sued our firm for what he thought he deserved as his bonus, because the deal closed. After all, that's what he's supposed to do. But our firm was small. We didn't have a huge bankroll to fund a year-long lawsuit. And so this comes back to impact me. And basically our firm right now is, the firm that I used to work for is closing up shop soon. And so I don't have that, coming into business school wanting to go back to that job, that's not an opportunity for me because the firm's basically closing up. And basically kind of as Chris said, I think the whole thing that he was getting to was the cover-up ends up being worse than the actual crime itself, because a lot of these infractions, selling securities to this old lady, we didn't find out until the deal had actually closed. He had covered them up. And I think that actually ended up being worse than what he actually did. And so luckily I was able to find another job, but it certainly has impacted the way I look at life and especially what I'm doing after business school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is George Hayes. I was in public accounting, probably number 2, right behind investment bankers in flashy lifestyle. So my topic's nowhere near as fun as anybody else's. All professional service firms, the name of the game is billing hours, whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, consultant. So whatever you do that day, you go bill that client for the hours you worked on them. Most clients, however, get billed by the respective firm on a fixed fee basis. So then the partners and managers of your specific job or client will go put together a budget and match the hours to the fees that they're going to charge. Well, that doesn't always work out. So you will get pressure, or at least I did as a younger staff person early in my career, to say, hey, we really got to watch the hours we work. So nobody will tell you not to bill an hour that you worked, but they will ask you in a very roundabout way, or sort of try to push you in a direction to say, hey, we took an extra hour for lunch today, or don't forget you did that today, and try to make sure that you don't do what you're supposed to, even though from the second you walk in the door as an accountant, you are told to bill every hour you work, because that's what's best for the firm and that's what's best for the client. So it becomes a very slippery slope, as this is not something that will really affect your day-to-day or make the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but it's sort of a line in the sand that you have to choose to cross early in your career. Am I going to do what I'm told to do, what the rules say, or am I going to do what my boss is telling me to do? I would love to tell you that as a staff, I found the magic bullet and ended this at my firm, but it's not what occurred. What I can recommend is if you incur a small ethical issue such as this, there are avenues in your firms or in whatever workplace you go on to where you will have sort of an informal mentor or a formal mentor, and you can raise these concerns that you have without even having to name names. And many firms, mine as well, will make initiatives to make sure that people do not, try to push you in the wrong direction or push you into these gray areas. Further, what you can also do is, as you go on in your career, remember how it made you felt when somebody pushed you in that direction, and make sure that you don't push people that way, and try to find other ways of taking on these issues. For one, the issue I just mentioned, you can understand that you can go to the partners early, or it's okay to be wrong. You can miss budgets. It's going to happen. Everybody understands we're human, and that planning's not perfect. So I'd love to say that I'm a beacon of ethical integrity, and that I found the magic bullet for everything. But I guess I would just say be wary of when it starts, because if you start early going down that road and not, staying with your true ethical self, it can be really hard to come back. Thanks.
Slippery slope, George. We have time for at least a couple questions here. I'm sure that our panelists raised an issue that somebody would like to follow up on, so I'd like to ask a question here.
Steve, I guess, what was the reaction of the person when this was uncovered? Was this an intentional cover-up the entire time, or was there a conversation at that point?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was a cover-up, but I think he knew what he was doing was sloppy. And I think if you asked him today, he wouldn't say or wouldn't admit that he did anything wrong. In his mind, everything he was doing was right. He was doing the best for the client, right? He was trying to get the deal closed. But if you kind of take a step back and look at it kind of from an ethical point of view, selling stock to people who have really no business, shouldn't be investing in something like that. Does he really have the best intentions in mind? So.
Another question? I thought our panelists gave a number of good bits of advice on having a mentor, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And as Chris mentioned, when you're interviewing for a job, trying to find out as much as you can. You can't be certain of exactly what the ethical posture of a firm is, but don't be afraid to ask the questions. I remember having a student probably 20 years ago, and said, oh yeah, in a first job interview, I asked the company whether they had a code of ethics, and they were kind of taken aback by that, but they thought it was a good question. So don't be afraid to ask those tough ethical questions. And if you have any private questions you'd like to ask our panelists, I'm sure they're willing to stick around after the event's over to answer those. And please join me again in a round of applause for some excellent presentations. So now we're moving on to the Hesburgh Award ceremony, and usually at this time, my colleague Father Ollie Williams will come up and give a brief introduction to Father Ted, who for most of you probably needs no introduction, but I'm sure there's some people that aren't as familiar with Father Hesburgh as others. Father Ollie, unfortunately, is traveling today. He was conveniently out of town, so he's handed this job on to me, and we could go on for hours talking about Father Hesburgh, and I just discovered it today, but Notre Dame has a wonderful website now devoted to Father Ted's life, and I just touch on a few of the very highest points, but Father Theodore M. Hesburgh, C.S.C., who was also born in Syracuse, New York, like Frank Cahill, turned 96 in May of 2013. He may have retired in 1987 after 35 years as Notre Dame's president, but the momentum he established as a leader in higher education, advocate for human rights, and citizen of the world continues to this day. For Father Hesburgh, Notre Dame has always been home. Now living in the Holy Cross House with the retired members of the C.S.C., he keeps office hours daily in the library that bears his name. He maintains correspondence, receives visitors, and my wife and I were just there today, and his administrative assistant said he comes in from about 1:30 to 4:30, but she makes him go home at 4:30. He just can't really, at his age, do much more or take on extra events such as this, but he certainly conveys his congratulations to Southwest Airlines. And if you've never been in his office, it's worth a trip to the 13th floor just to see all the memorabilia. There's pictures of him with, I think, about 6 or 7 presidents and locked arm in arm with Martin Luther King. And not only has have a wonderful view of campus, as my youngest son said, we had the good fortune that Father Ted said a mass for our 25th wedding anniversary, and since we were out of town, the only people who were in attendance were our 3 sons who were fairly young at the time, and our youngest, who was about 12, said to me after it was over, kind of looking around Father Hesburgh's office and all the artifacts that were there, he said, "Dad, I think I've just met the most famous person I've ever met." I said, "Jim, you may have to go a few more years before you meet anybody as famous as Father Ted Hesburgh," which he's certainly a living legend here at Notre Dame. Just a very few of his accomplishments and honors. He's a recipient of over 150 honorary degrees, and as of 2009, that was in the Guinness Book of World Records. He became the first individual from post-secondary education to be awarded the United States Congressional Gold Medal in 2000. He has served in over 16 presidential appointments involving him in civil rights, peaceful uses of atomic energy, campus unrest, immigration reform, including the United States policy of amnesty for immigrants in the mid-1980s. He was the first priest to be elected to the Board of Overseers at Harvard, and for 2 years served as president of the Harvard Board, and he also was a director of the Chase Manhattan Bank. So very distinguished career. Next, I need to recognize Nicole Niera, who nominated Southwest Airlines for the Hesburgh Award. Nicole is an MBA student from Panama who wrote the nomination paper as part of my marketing ethics class. Unfortunately, Nicole is at a family function, cannot be here today, but I want to share with you a few of the important points from her paper that demonstrate the criteria are ethical, socially responsible, and sustainable business practices. As Nicole pointed out in her paper, Southwest's mission statement states that the company is dedicated to the highest quality of customer service delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, and company spirit. And I'm sure there are many people who've been on Southwest and know that they live their mission statement. Their major values are honesty, integrity, personal responsibility. Their CEO, Gary Kelly, said recently, it's about having the right expectations, setting the right example, and not straying ethically. And secondly, the environmental aspect of the community of the company is well published in a 112-page called One Report. And for those of you that do not follow annual reports, most companies have an annual report and then a social responsibility report. That Southwest is one of the few companies, and maybe Christine, you'll talk a little bit about this One Report, as well as having a stewardship report and a Southwest Cares report. And they have an impressive list of environmental activities that I won't go through one by one with you here. On the third point on their corporate social responsibility, they have actually two departments within the company, charitable giving and community relations, which I believe Christine's part of, that work on their outreach, donations, volunteerism, and they work with various activities, including Ronald McDonald House, Make-A-Wish Foundation, the Medical Transportation Grant Program. In 2012, Southwest donated over $2 million through complimentary round-trip tickets to nonprofit hospitals to assist families facing serious illness. So major efforts there. And as Nicole ended her paper, as you can see, Southwest Airlines is a company that satisfies ethical, environmental, and social criteria through many different departments and activities. Southwest Airlines has been proven to be a worthy recipient of the Hesburgh Award. And just to reinforce that, when we had our meeting of the other finalists, there were several other very strong companies included. Father Williams, who's not here today, so I can embarrass him that he's not in attendance, actually wrote an article in 2012 for the Journal of Catholic Social Thought, Is it possible to have a business based on solidarity and mutual trust? The challenge of Catholic social teaching to capitalism and the promise of Southwest Airlines. So that Ali was reinforcing Nicole's nomination, and they were unanimously selected as our recipient. First, before I give out the award, I want to introduce Christine Ortega, who, as I said, graduated with a bachelor degree from Notre Dame in American Studies. For the last 10 years, she's been working in community affairs and grassroots communication and strategic outreach for the company. Prior to that, she was an area marketing manager and a director of media and marketing. She started her career in the public television sector in San Antonio, and she has received many awards, as well as major activity that she's involved with is the Smithsonian Institute Board of Advisors of Latino Center. Two of her noteworthy awards are 2013 Elaine Mendoza Visionary Award given by the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the 2009 Southwest Airlines President's Award. Please join me in giving a warm welcome back to Christine. That's fine. Going to wait for the official presentation until Christine's remarks are done.
It's really good to be back on campus. It feels great. It's nice to feel lost and then have somebody say, can I help you? So thank you for all the hospitality that just continues to grow at this university. It's really just a great feeling to be back. So thank you for the privilege to be here. I did want to share with you a little bit about Southwest Airlines. You probably are familiar with it. When if you've traveled in any airline, you kind of know the ropes of how to travel. And one of the things I was impressed with the paper from Nicole Guarini, she talked about, and Patrick, you read our mission statement. And our mission statement says nothing about the airline business. There's not one word in there about running an airline or running airplanes, flying airplanes. It talks about delivering the best kind of customer service that you can deliver. That is what our mission statement, that's the core of it. So really, we talk about, Southwest Airlines people talk about being in the customer service business. That is kind of our cornerstone. And when I saw the criteria for the Hesburgh Award, it talked about a number of things that I thought I would share with you insofar as how does that relate to an airline? How does it relate to a business? And then how does it relate to you as an individual person who's looking for where you belong and what you want to do? So we have a report that is called the One Report. It's a global reporting index. It's an unusual report because it's a report that encompasses everything from pencils to planes on an international scope. So it's a good report if you want to understand what's happening on the global reporting structure. We're actually the first U.S. corporation to actually utilize that report. It's very detailed, it's very in-depth, and it measures a lot of different areas. So be familiar with it because it is part of a global reporting system. The categorizations that we use are people, performance, and planet. Those are the three things that really guide how we run. We want to run a good company, we want to have good products, and we want to run our business in a trustworthy way that is related to and connected to community. And that's the hard part, is how do you know what your community is about? Because what we do in New York does not work in New Mexico. What we do in Connecticut would never work in Seattle. So understanding community, understanding where you're from, understanding what you care about in a community is really, really, it's an art to figure out how you make that happen. And our focus is on that. It's on the triple bottom line: the people, performance, and planet. So on the people side, I'm going to share a little bit about each of those things, but on the people side, I wanted to also, before I leave, share some secrets, if you will, about how we focus on people and how you can use some of our strategies when you're thinking about your own career and what might help you catapult you above the fray, if you will. So insofar as performance is concerned, we talk about performance on the stock market and our responsibility to our stockholders and stakeholders, both on the financial end and on the community end. So those are important barometers, if you will, about performance. We also are a company of airplanes. So keeping our aircraft performing at peak is really, really critical. Having the best mechanics, having the best dispatchers, having the best maintenance crews for our aircraft is really important. All of that is part of performance. When we're talking about the planet, we're also, we're an airline, right? We burn fossil fuel, so there's no way around that. We are not the most clean airline, if you will, because we burn fossil fuel. There's no way around that. What we can do is make how we burn fuel more respectful of the environment. And we learn a lot, especially after 9/11, when we had to figure out whether or not we were going to keep our doors open. We basically put our ear to the ground and listened to our people. And there was a way, our pilots had meetings and they explained to us on executive levels, decision making, that if they flew the aircraft 10,000 feet lower, we could save a significant amount of fuel. The ride would be very important to us because if you fly at 10,000 feet lower, we're flying at 20,000 feet, the atmosphere conditions get in the way. So as a passenger, you feel you feel all the bumps, you feel all the clouds. And so what was critical to us is that our passengers not feel that. You should feel safe, you should feel comfortable, you should have a smooth ride. So the higher you go, the smoother the ride. And so what our pilots determined was that in the geographical part of the country where it would lend itself to, we should consider flying at lower altitudes to save fuel and also to keep the experience of the customers at a positive level. So when you listen to people, you listen to those who really understand the business, again, you're able to figure out how to become more responsible with respect to the planet. The one report is another example of how we are respectful of the planet. We don't print a document. Our report is completely online. We don't print there's no hard copies, no audit report that's printed. And then the other thing is that every aircraft, every flight, we recycle. We recycle aircraft, the cans that we use on the aircraft for your soft drinks, newspapers. People bring a lot of newspapers on the aircraft too, in the mornings especially. So we do recycle tons of materials on every aircraft. So that's on the performance on the planet. On the people side, I'm assuming when you have a conflict between a customer and a company, what is one of the most important common wisdoms that you understand? What happens when a customer comes to a store and says, I have a problem? What are you thinking in the back of your mind? What do you say about the customer? Thank you. Okay, one of the common wisdoms is that the customer is always right. Does that sound familiar to you? Does it sound familiar? At Southwest Airlines, that undergirding of thought does not exist. At Southwest Airlines, we tell our people, our internal customers, our employees, that in many ways the customer is not right and the customer is frequently wrong. But it is our job to make sure that they understand what they purchased, make sure that we give them options so that then they're able to go away and make a good decision and feel good about what they've chosen. I mean, look at your own travel arrangements. You're making your travel arrangements. You're giving an airline your money 30 days before you use the product. So how do you actually remember what it is you actually bought? That happens a lot. And so as long as we're able to talk to that customer, make sure that we're explaining to them exactly what happened and what they actually have, the outcome is to make sure that the customer does not feel wrong. But the main point is to understand that mistakes do happen. Misunderstandings take place, especially when you buy something and you don't use it till 30 days later or more. So at Southwest Airlines, that common wisdom does not exist in that way. And then the other important thing about Southwest Airlines is that we have internal and external customers. It's a very important distinction with us, because I am an internal customer because I work at the company and I'm referred to as an internal customer. And then everyone else who flies on us and who's purchasing and who's actually helping to sustain the company, like you are as a customer, you're referred to often as a customer, but we know in our culture that it's also referred to as an external customer. And it is my job to make sure that you have the best experience you can possibly have when you come on Southwest Airlines. But internally at the company, we invest a lot of time and effort in figuring out how to reinforce the internal customer, how to support the internal customer, and we end up having maybe 1.4% of turnover at Southwest Airlines because we're so supportive of our internal customers. And what we try to do is make our environment fun. We try to make sure that we're hiring the right people. We have a tendency to hire for attitude and train for skill. So we will select someone who may have a little bit of a challenge with the skill, but who has a great attitude. And so I wanted to leave you with just one little exercise that you can use in your everyday life about how to have a good attitude, right? So I would suggest that you do this exercise with somebody who loves you and not somebody that maybe doesn't like you, right? And what you would say is you just take this sentence in your mind and you would say, like myself. Christine Ortega would be more fun if she would just blank. So I'm giving you that sentence for your own kind of development. How can you be more fun? How can you be more engaging with somebody else? And make sure you do this with somebody who loves you. And really, even though now, as I'm sharing with you, our performance and people and planet, before we had that, I've been with Southwest for 25 years. Before we had the performance, people, and planet categorizations, it was interesting to me because all of my training and all of my orientation went back to this one very simple sentence that we recite, that I was constantly being told almost every month, and it said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that is exactly the phrase that we used for many, many years. We continue to use that phrase within our company. So we're very honored to be the recipient of the Hesburgh Award. I'm particularly honored that it was Nicole Guarini, who is from Notre Dame, who nominated us. So that's a really great feeling. We are passionate about our purpose and how we connect our people. And it's important that we connect with people in their lives. And I'm feeling very honored that I'm able to connect with you again today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Christine has agreed to answer a couple questions. I'm sure there's a few airplane external customers, is that what you called them? Customers. And maybe I'll start with the, well, people might be thinking of, that Herb Kelleher was one of the founders. He has long said, or I've read for a number of years, to satisfied employees, or as you called them, internal customers, lead to satisfied external customers. And maybe if you could just expand on, having worked for the company for 25 years, what that means.
Yeah. That's a very simple concept. It's like your family, right? When you're taking care of your brothers and sisters, your siblings, your cousins, you always are taking care of your family first. You're going to try to remember things about them first, and then you're going to remember things that have to do with your friends. Then you're going to remember things that have to do with your, your church. So, a very tangible example is if I have a phone call, and it's an urgent call from an external customer on the line, and I have a call from an internal customer on the line, I will answer the internal customer first and make sure that I'm giving that person the information that they need from me so that then they're able to serve their external customer. That's very important. This is a very basic idea of how you take care of the internal person first. Take care of those that are closer to you with the knowledge that they are going to be taking care of our external customers. We cannot survive without our external customers, and we know that. We understand and recognize that. But if our employees are unhappy, you've probably been at airports where you hear employees that are complaining, that are just not happy, they're making comments that you're just like, Lord, get me out of this place, right? So we prefer to create an environment that is just going to try to make people feel comfortable, make them feel relaxed and happy about where they are. What else? Anything else?
Yes, they're all satisfied.
Yep. Well, thank you very much again. It was nice to be here.